Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is going to be a video about the NPC meme and tying in a realization that came to me some years back when I went through one of the toughest times in my life. It's a realization about people in the world and things like that, and how this NPC meme kind of encapsulates some of that and makes me understand why it's affecting some people as much as it is here. So I'm going to put up an example of the NPC meme here that I just made, which is a tie-in with the Colin Kaepernick meme from some time back, the Nike one, where it was like, it wasn't a meme, it was a Nike ad. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing anything, just do it and blow. So I kind of took that kind of template and threw the NPC thing in there, and it says, won't believe in something that isn't part of my code. Just can't do it, with a exclamation mark. And I'm going to have some different NPC memes that I've seen kind of scrolling on the side there for you guys to check out. But so this NPC meme is non-playable character. It states that I think it came tied into this article that came out saying that a large number of people don't really have that much of an inner monologue when they're kind of walking around. They don't really think about things, they're more just reacting to different things. And that's something that a lot of people have said. And if you actually read the study, it's kind of a situation where what are the parameters of this study? How much of the stuff do we just go off an instinct? How much do we just react on? Like if someone just throws something at you, you kind of just put your hands up to try to catch it. Most people don't just let it hit them in their head. But then technically, if you were a non-player character, if it wasn't in your coding, like in a video game, to actually have your hands go up, the ball would just hit you in the face. So NPCs, that's kind of what they come from. Non-player characters, non-playable characters, not non-player characters. Non-playable characters. And it kind of comes from this thing when you're playing video games, mostly in role-playing games, or just any game in general. But I think this mostly applies in role-playing games. For me, I've had a lot of experience playing those. I really like them a lot. But non-playable characters are people who kind of give you quests or just background characters walking around doing things, or that are just like, yeah, this is just the farmer. You get to this town, there's some farmers in the back. You can go up and talk to them, and they just have a set level of dialogue. Or if you say a certain thing to them, it triggers like some quest for them to give you. But you can never actually take control of these characters. Now, people have said that a lot of people on the left, this is mostly coming, the memeing is mostly coming from the right. People on the left try to meme, but it's just not as successful. So you have a situation where now they're saying a lot of people on the left are essentially non-playable characters, NPCs, and they don't have an inner monologue. They can't really debate things. They can't really discuss things. They don't really break things down, but they just react. They have a code like, okay, should I be offended by this? Who's telling me I'm offended by this? Does it fit my programming? Yes. Then they have things like the Kanye West situation coming. They're like, okay, Kanye West is black. He's a celebrity. He should be on the left. When he says George Bush doesn't care about black people, that fits my coding. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Now when he's saying think for yourself, it's like kind of breaks the coding. And the NPCs are like, what are we supposed to do with this? What are we supposed to do with this? So that kind of situation has occurred. And I definitely do think there are NPCs on both sides of the aisle. This is just a general thing. I think there's a lot of things where we kind of just go by instinct. We kind of just go with our certain programming and things like that. Just like, okay, we know we're in this culture. That is kind of what it is to be acclimated to a culture. When you get to a culture, you get to a community, you kind of like, okay, you understand this is a certain behavior. If you're on a bus in a certain environment, a pregnant woman comes in. For some people, it's just, okay, stand up and move. If you're in a certain situation, there's certain customs, culture. I think all these things are kind of programming. They're kind of coded into you. Now, another thing about coding, another thing about programming is our genetics. How much do our genetics actually play a part with what we are? People are talking about races and things like that, saying, oh, certain races have these kind of qualities, these other races have these kind of qualities. That's why these races should stick together. That's why these ones should be left out. That explains what this race does, this one. That explains what this race does because of this. And isn't that programming? Isn't that part of the code, part of the things that are just in there? I know you can adjust it subtly, you can adjust it, but it has to be within these parameters. Like I said on this meme that I made, won't believe in something that isn't part of my code. So is it won't be able to do something, won't be able to achieve something, won't be able to actually get somewhere if it's not part of your code. And that's kind of the problem with this kind of thing. I think that's why I really like what Kanye is saying with the whole think for yourself thing. Break out of that whole paradigm. Don't just think like, oh, you're black, you're living in a white man's world that's kind of controlling you, so you're always going to be with programmed into this kind of mindset where you can't believe you can actually improve your life because in the parameters of this world, in this systematic world, in this systemic system, you are planned and coded into a situation where you cannot break out of these set determined area. You can't break out of the hood. You can't break out of this behavioral pattern. You can't make a better life of yourself. Like that's the coding for white people. This is the coding for black people. That's the coding for Latin Americans or Hispanic people. That's the coding for Asian people. You can't have crossover. You can't move across these things. These are limitations that you have. So how much does that actually play a part of that? How much are people actually just non-playable characters? And I've mentioned this before in my view of the world. I think everybody is the center of their own world. Everybody lives in their reality tunnel. And now people involved in your reality tunnel are involved in different kind of ways. You never really can control those people. Pretty much everybody in your world. I guess it comes to a point where it's like, okay, if you have a wife, if you have friends, if you have kids, you can have influence over them, but you can't completely own them. You're the only playable character in your reality tunnel. You're Ready Player One. You're number one player. You're the one who kind of decides what happens in that reality tunnel. You can affect people in other ways, but you can never actually control them in the sense that you control yourself. Although now you can start discussing now, what are politicians doing? Why are politicians or people drawn to certain levels of power? They talk about the addictive ability of actually being able to control a human being and do something. Now you go to a situation where you have something like coaching. I remember playing American football in high school and in college, and then I started playing the video games, and I was just playing the video games. These are controllable characters. Even in the video game, when you're playing something like Madden, you control the person with the ball. So the ball is snapped to you, and then snapped to the quarterback, and then the quarterback can either pass the ball to the wide receiver or can hand it to the running back. Now you have different settings where you can play multiplayer, where somebody can be controlling the wide receiver at that time. But the different thing is like you can have a situation where the ball, you're controlling the character with the ball. Now when you throw the ball to somebody else, that the wide receiver catches the ball, they get control of it. If you're in defense, you're controlling one character, you can switch from characters and things like that. But if somebody picks the ball, gets an interception, you automatically get switched to that character. So there's that kind of different ways of switching it. But the reason I'm talking about the football thing is I was playing these games and realizing, okay, these parameters of controlling these characters here is already so much frustration because there's only limitations to what they can do. The control system, how much you can actually change what they do. They have to work within the parameters of the game. And that's already frustrating enough. Then I was imagining like, wow, when my football coaches gave me really good, really different point of view and respect for my football coaches, because I'm like, they're actually trying to control individual human beings with their own minds, and they're living in their own reality tunnels and trying to get them to kind of come together and do one thing together. And this is the one thing I think I still kind of enjoy and appreciate in sports, just seeing the ability of different people coming together to do that one thing. But is the coach really controlling these people, or are you just giving suggestions and then those characters can decide whether they're actually going to carry out those instructions? Okay, so as I mentioned at the start of the video, now I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about something that happened to me. I think I'll expand on this whole situation. There's a lot of things that it has made me a stronger person having gone through this, yet at the same point, I wouldn't really wish other people go through this. If the positive things that have come out of me going through that tough time, if I could find some way where if somebody convinced me that you have to go through that tough time in order to have those things, then I think I would suggest people actually get to a point like that. But I don't think you have to. I think there's ways to avoid getting that bad as I was at that point. But I remember coming out of it and looking around my life, my world, and the people I was talking to and wondering, okay, why did the people who didn't say anything not say anything? And I just started asking, like, kind of like, why did you guys not see what was going on with me? But that's kind of on the side, because that's a kind of situation where people say like, okay, we don't understand if we're supposed to say something, or you kind of not noticing, or you haven't really been told about it, or these kind of things. And I had friends that were really spread apart. So some people were only getting little parts that I let them know. Some people would actually come in and see some of the state that I was in, but it wasn't that strong of a situation. But people were starting to say, oh, well, I don't know. From what I know, I wasn't quite sure if I should say something. And I kind of started wondering, like, why am I assuming that everybody is approaching things in a way that I approach things? And then I started thinking about the stress that I was going through and the ideas that I was going through and kind of how I was breaking things down in my mind and thinking like, oh my God, like, am I thinking too much about this? I used to say like, I think too much, and then I wonder if thinking too much is, if I'm just thinking too much that I think too much, or is thinking that you think too much, maybe just because you're thinking too much, already proof that you're thinking too much. And it just be like a infinite regression of thinking too much and thinking too much. And it gets to the point where I started asking people, when you sit around, do you have these different voices in your head? I'm not talking like schizophrenia or anything, but I created this whole world of characters and things like that, which I realized were kind of amalgams. I think it's amalgams. Some of these words, like you write them down, but you hardly ever say them. Amalgams of different people that I knew, different experiences that I'd been in, characters that I read about, and kind of just trying to understand and putting myself in those positions, and just broke my psyche up into different parts to kind of have these internal conversations and debates and things like that. And maybe people who have friends who are this open already do it. And now that since then, I've become more open about who I am and just ask questions about people, have this YouTube channel, which I get into conversations with people, which thank you guys very much for the comment section. I really enjoy getting in those conversations back and forth with people and just seeing that, hey, what I'm actually saying is actually affecting the almonds of some people, and we can have some back and forth. But even just in my personal life, I've been talking to more of the friends. I've met people since then by just being more true to myself and being more open to myself, with people who are willing to come and talk about these things. And I still have my headmates, or what you want to call them, that universe, the carbon universe of those characters, but I don't seem to go there as much. I know it was a thing where when I was stressed, I would go there a lot more, and I was realizing that's kind of how I'd work things out. Or I remember there's times I'd just be sitting with people, we're kind of talking, hanging out, and then I'll kind of just like go quiet and sometimes just look off, and then people will be like, sometimes people are like, wow, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And it's not that I was bored with them or anything, but it's just, could be something that came from the past. Somebody said something that triggered it, or I saw something, and I would just get on these tangents. Like, you've seen it when I'm recording some of these videos. I'll just go on like tangent or something, but that will happen and my mind will just go somewhere, and I'll just go back and forth and be talking about things and whatnot. And then I'd wonder like, no, I'm just like, no, I just had some thought line and just going with it. And then I started wondering, isn't that a usual thing? Isn't that a common thing? And I started asking people like, do you guys have this? Do you guys sit around and actually just think about stuff? Do you have times where you're actually sitting there and there's nothing going on in your mind? You're not really thinking about things. And so people were like, yeah, I do. And I was shocked. I was really shocked by that. And I was just thinking like, I know I've tried meditation. I can do some things where I can focus on one thing, or I've done this thing in, I read this book, Prometheus Rising, this sleeping thing, where you lie down on your back with your hands to your side and you breathe through your nose 20 times, your mouth 20 times, your nose 20 times, your mouth 20 times. And you keep doing that, and slowly by slowly you slow down. And then you kind of get in a situation where you have some lucid sleeping, where you kind of float out of your body. It feels like that. And I've done that a few times, and I've been able to meditate on certain situations. But having a time when my mind isn't really just bouncing from different topics and talking about different things, that hardly happens. Sure, maybe if I'm reading something, if I'm watching some manga or some anime, or watching some show, or listening to some music, even in those cases, it's normally like I have to be doing something in order to shut down that other things. But just thinking that there are people who literally just sit there and just don't really have much going on in their mind was really shocking to me. It was really an odd kind of situation to me. I was like, wow. And I think that's kind of the NPC thing. And at least when it comes to the lack of inner monologue. Now, when it comes to the reactions to things, I don't really think we're not all NPC at some things. I mean, I get that we have different things where we'll be able to think about certain things, but most of our lives are just based on certain programming, certain coding, certain behavioral patterns that we have. Look at what somebody else is doing, we go along with it. So I think that whole NPC meme, at least for me, that's what kind of brought me a flashback to that, where I was like remembering that realization and just that kind of panic where I was like, holy crap, these people around me are just like walking around like zombies. They're not really like experiencing life. They're not really taking things in. But I mean, they're still existing, and it also could just be me. It also could just be me also having an odder kind of overactive mind, or a mind that's just more active on certain things from very realistic experiences that have happened in my background. For me, the way I'm thinking may also just be some code, because as I mentioned, everybody is the main player in their life, is the sole player in their life. There's some role playing games, massively multiplayer role. Yeah, I think this is the perfect example. Massively multiplayer role playing games. We'll go online like something like Warcraft or these kind of games. You go online where pretty much everyone you meet, not in a village, is an actual person playing. There's other games where you can even have games where the villains, the creatures you're trying to kill are also players. And I have in mind this kind of game, like Second Life is something like that, where I think you go online and pretty much everyone you meet is a person. But I was just thinking of creating an entire world, kind of like the movie Ready Player One, where every single person you meet in the game, every single character, every single sentient being in the game, you can go in the game and be a cat if you want. You can go in the game and be a fly, a mosquito, and your whole plan of the whole day is just flying around and stinging people. Like that's all you do. And you have your short ass time span, and then like after your mosquito, you can do the whole like thing that they say in Indian culture, in the Hindu culture, in the Hindu religion, where you actually just get reincarnated. So you live as a mosquito, then you kind of, depending on how good of a mosquito life in whatever is considered a good life, you can either go to a lower life form or you can go to a higher one. So this is kind of thing where you can do anything, where every single thing could actually be a thing. Maybe you can even go further and have a situation where you can even be cells. You can just be like, I'm just going to be a cell in a character, and that character itself is an actual person else controlling that thing, but you're just like a white blood cell in a character fighting diseases, and then somebody else is playing a virus and they enter. So anyway, I think I can imagine games getting that deep in the future. But anyway, I think we're all NPCs, because even in a game like Warcraft, even if you are meeting somebody else who is actually being played by somebody in a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, you can't play that person. It's a non-playable character. Technically, they're playable because somebody is playing that character, but they're not playable when it matters to your life. In your reality tunnel, they're not playable. As you in this game playing that character, they're not playable. So everybody, even if I meet somebody who thinks even more than I do about random things and things like that, I am still not able to play that character. I can interact with that character, but that character has certain limitations. I have certain limitations, and our reality tunnels can only fit in certain ways, be it the location that we're in, be it the language that we speak, be it previous experiences. If somebody's wearing like a KKK hat, like I'll be like, I already know enough about the KKK people that I am not going to deal with you at all. Or somebody may have prejudices towards, like, somebody might be like, oh, black men actually commit more crimes. They see me walking down the street and they cross the street because they're like, I don't want to deal with that character. So there's all these kind of things where people can actually interact and not. But anyway, so that was my thoughts on the NPC meme and the NPC thing and the whole inner monologue thing. For you guys, let me know what you guys think about this. How often do you guys just sit there and really have little to nothing going on in your mind? Or are you more of a person who's just constantly active, constantly thoughts? And I think those constant thoughts can derail me from actually focusing on doing certain things. But I have thought of, if it was a situation where you actually are an NPC, where you're sitting there and there's nothing going through your head, I wouldn't want that kind of life. I don't know if you would. It seems terrifying, and I think that's part of why it's terrifying to a lot of people, is that feeling that you're just kind of going through the motions. Just finishing up. So I was saying that's also why things like The Matrix are very successful, because I think they talk on things. Even this whole zombie, the reason zombies are so popular right now is I think because people are aware. People are aware of so much more. And when you're aware of all these things to think about, and you realize like, wow, I actually don't really know all these things. These whole ideas of being determinist, or being in just part of this machine program, or just being a brain in this water and everything's a simulation, or just being a zombie, just going around brains, you just have like a one-track mind. You don't really actually have the ability to actually enjoy life to its actual fullest. it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing realizing one's limitations, and I think if people thought they were that kind of situation where they kind of limited and dehumanized in that sense, I don't think they would like it. And it's a challenging time, but realize everyone is everyone else's NPC. Like I am an NPC to pretty much everybody else. I'm an NPC to everyone who hears me, meets me, talks about me. We can interact, but I am non-playable. You can't play me. Like you can't be me. I'm the only one that can play myself, and I can't play any of you. So you guys are all my non-playable characters. Now, non-playable characters have different levels of coding. Some are very simple. A chicken in a Zelda game is a non-playable character, but so is like Princess Zelda in most of them. I think Princess Zelda. In most of them, I think there's like some where you can play as Princess Zelda, but like even like the enemies, Ganondorf would be a non-playable character, and Gandalf is the main villain. So there's some who are very central. There's non-playable characters who are very, very central and make the whole experience of you playing a game, of you experiencing some time in a universe, so worthwhile. And I think it's up to you guys to find the best non-playable characters to associate yourself with. And yeah, I'm going to expand on this in some separate videos as we go on because I think it's a really interesting thing. And there's a lot of things coming up, like the Elizabeth Warren thing, like the race, as I mentioned before. Like, why are people so concerned with like their race and their genetics and their coding and the epigenetics, what's turned on and off? There's a lot of interesting things in this. So yeah, that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store. I think I'll also post. I'll have a blog post with a bunch of these NPC memes, or you can just check online. There's tons of them. Okay, so one last thing I was thinking about with the whole thoughts thing. This is something I'll have a separate video about because I want to focus more on this actual topic. But people are talking about, okay, the NPCs, they don't have inner monologue. But now when you have inner monologue, sometimes you'll think of some really horrendous things. Like I've thought of some really horrific things, but I've also thought of some really amazing things. How much is the actual what's the importance of inner monologue if you don't act on it? Like if you think something really horrible about somebody but you don't actually act on it, are you a horrible person? Like if you're writing a story, if somebody writes a character that's a serial killer, does that make them a serial killer or have the ability to be a serial killer, if they can plan that thing so realistically? So let me know what you guys think about that. And let me know what you think about the NPC meme. One last thing. Oddly enough, there's this term called mob, a mob character. People hear this. I hear this a lot more when I'm reading manga or watching anime. But it's also a thing in games and things. The mob characters are technically non-playable characters as well. And then, of course, you also have these mobs of people when a mob goes out there and they don't really have agency. They're not really thinking as individuals. It's kind of just out there like following this mob mentality where there's not really decision-making processes, and you see a lot of the people on the left politically in these mobs in the streets, and that's mob behavior, mob character behavior, non-playable character behavior. Very common stuff. Just thought there was something with that because there was this one meme I also saw saying like, isn't it interesting if you take the word mob and move one letter off, N turns to M, P turns to O, C turns to B, and then you get from the NPC, you get to mob. So yeah, goodbye.